beat that, eh? Good morning, everybody. I just want to add to what Chantal said a while ago. As a patient, a myeloma patient, I'm constantly in front of doctors and nurses and x-ray technicians and people like that are constantly in front of me. But when I go tomorrow, as a matter of fact, to South Lake for my monthly blood work, I will see Laura, and she will take my blood, and it will go into that really neat machine in the corner, and it's gone. And you know, all the sight, all the mind, but I want to let you know that we know as myeloma patients that you are performing very important services in the background, and although we don't see you, I thank you. So, again, good morning. Who am I? From a little town in northern Ontario, and it's called South Porcupine. I guess the best way to describe it, it's just south of a lake called Porcupine. And other than that, it's very close to the city of Timmins, and I'm sure you may have heard of Timmins. And before you ask, I do not know Shania Twain or Song and Tom Connors, but I can tell you I really know a couple of really good hockey players. I love watching hockey. I literally fell in love with airplanes. Porcupine Lake was a place where we had bushplanes, beavers, otters, any of the famous Canadian airplanes, some of the famous pilots were there. And I just knew even from kindergarten, I'd watch at recess and the airplanes would be landing, I was going to be part of that. And I did. It was, airport operations was a very successful part of my life. And fast forward, I moved to Southern Ontario, and about 18 years ago, I was jogging, and I thought, geez, my hip is starting to get really sore. Didn't think anything of it. Had an appointment with my doctor to talk about something else, and I went in and I said, Dr. Nicholas, there's something wrong with my hip. And he knew I was a jogger, so he said, well, you probably pulled something. So let's just watch it for a couple of weeks and see what happens. A couple of weeks later, my jogging days were behind me because I couldn't run anymore. It was everything I could do to walk across the street. So back I went to the doctor and he ordered an x-ray. Say a week later, I'm going back into the office and he told me, he said, you probably pulled a muscle. So think about that for a minute. I'm going into that doctor's office with the mindset that I pulled a muscle and I'm going to get a cortisone shot, you're good to go. Well, I'm sitting in this little room waiting for Dr. Nicholas to come in, and as soon as he walked in, I could tell from the look on his face that whatever it was, cortisone wasn't going to do it. And he says, it looks like you have multiple myeloma. And I thought, what the heck is multiple myeloma? You know, you hear the C word, that's all you hear. That's, you know, you have cancer. And God bless him, to his credit, he said, you need to get to see an oncologist very, very quickly. And within a week, I was in seeing Dr. Luke at South Lake, and I'm happy to report, along with Dr. Peter Anglin, who, if anybody here from Princess Margaret, he used to be there, they're part of my team now at South Lake. So, you know, you have you have a lot of things going through your mind. So the first thing they have to do is a bone marrow biopsy, which I can tell you is not my idea of a fun time. You know, and you're worried, like, what is a diagnosis? Like, as Chantal says, we still have people that confuse this with melanoma. What is the outcome? What are the treatments going to be? So after that was confirmed with the biopsy, down to Princess Margaret I went, and I'll never forget, it was on my first visit there. There was a nurse, her name was Margot, and she came up to me and introduced herself and said, this is what we're going to do, but she said, you got to do a couple of things too. And I said, what's that? And she said, well, you got to get involved with the patient support group. There happens to be a meeting of the patient support group in Toronto in the following week, and you should go. And you should also get involved with Myeloma Canada, because they have information, lots of information, and you can't do this alone. And no true words were ever spoken. I couldn't imagine being in this by myself. So the original diagnosis was 3 to 5 years. So apparently I like a challenge, and I said that to Dr. Luke, you've challenged me. And I reminded her a while ago that it's 18 years since we had that conversation. And she said, you're making me feel old. And I said, that's fine. Multiple myeloma patients like to be old. So the first thing was to, after the biopsy, we're watching the numbers. I had a very huge plasma, still have a huge plasmacytoma in my right hip. And they decided that I'm going to do some radiation treatments at Sunnybrook. So away I went to Sunnybrook. And I should tell you, you're going to learn that I do have a sense of humor. Part of the pre-treatment for radiation is you have to see the dental clinic at Sunnybrook. And I'm in the chair, and he's looking at my teeth, and I remember to this day what he said. He said, Mr. McCaw, I've noticed you're grinding your teeth a lot. Are you under any stress? No stress at all. So, in 2008, it was decided that the numbers were high enough and we better have an autologous stem cell transplant. So to prep for that, you go to actually Toronto General and they harvest your stem cells. They give you some beautiful drugs in your tummy to encourage the blood cells, the stem cells that come out into your blood veins. And I was in the chair for 4 hours to get enough stem cells for 2 transplants. Remember that for a bit later on. So I go home, and the next thing I get a call, yep, you're scheduled for a stem cell transplant, and you have to come down and have the central line put into your chest. So down I went to do that, and again with the humor, the doctor is about to put the central line in my chest, and he said, Mr. McCaw, I should tell you now, there's not a good time to sneeze or cough. So we got the line in, and over to the hospital I went. And again, now you probably know, now they do stem cell transplants as outpatients. Back then, it was not available to me because I'm by myself and the distance. So in you go. The first night you're in there, the nurses are getting you all prepped for this test and that test, and the next day in you come with melphalan, which is probably the most intense chemo that you'll ever have in your life. It's very, very strong. So the day later, they come in with your stem cells, and you're in a room, and there's just a nurse and a specialist from the blood lab, and of course they're making sure that those stem cells in that bag are yours and that nobody else's. So got through it, 17 days in the hospital. You feel like you got hit by a small truck. No, probably a big truck. And but you do get better. About a week after your transplant, they give you a boost to encourage things, kind of like boosting your car. And there's a white board in your room, and the nurse comes in every day, and you can see the numbers starting to go up. So I go home, and I'm starting to feel good. Eating is still a bit of a problem. About 4 or 5 months later, I'm going back to Princess Margaret thinking this is going to be a routine follow-up meeting. And Dr. Rankin says, Bob, we need to do it again. And I said, do what again? And he said, a second transplant. And I looked at him and said, seriously, you want me to go through that a second time? Yeah. So then we went. So we did the second transplant, again as an inpatient, and about the same time parameters. And I go home, and I'm starting to feel really good. And a couple of months later, Dr. Kukrecki was back then, and he was my doctor for my first one. And gave me a bit of maintenance for a little while, and next thing I know, I'm in a really good remission. you can fast forward that actually from there to 2017, and I was starting to come out of remission. And I kind of knew that because my numbers were starting to rise. They were telling me that, but my body was also telling me things because I rolled over in bed one night and broke 2 ribs. And I also had a situation called discompression fractures. Now, as you probably know, ribs will heal very slowly, but the disc fractures, I guess if you call them, can be improved by something called kyphoplasty. And Dr. Roger Smith at Western worked very hard on our behalf to get it covered so that myeloma patients could get that done. So we get prepped again for the 3rd transplant. Again, it's going to be in Princess Margaret. Now, if you recall, I said it took 4 hours for 2 transplants. This time, after 22 hours in a chair, over 4 or 5 days, I don't know how many injections of specialized drugs in my belly to get things going. We finally had enough, literally, for 1 more transplant. So, back to the hospital, I had my 3rd transplant, and that went very well. It was similar. I would probably say that the anti-nauseum drugs were a bit better, but still it's not a walk in the park by any means. And now I'm on Revlimid and dexamethasone, which is my favorite drug, and Zometa. And in 2019, when Dara was approved, it was added to my treatment. So I've been 6 years post-transplant and 5 years since DRD. I'm doing very well. Earlier this year, I had a couple of small lesions that were radiated and resolved. So there I am. I'm doing the things again that I enjoy. There's managing side effects could be a challenge. Chemo and transplants and any of the stuff that you're on are certainly not pleasant. But as I said earlier, you see improvements, and I've had the kyphoplasty, and the DRD is doing well. My major symptoms are fatigue and bone issues. Bone issues were resolved, as I mentioned. The fatigue is very easy. There's an app for that. So, at the end of the 3rd transplant, I'm going back and forth to the hospital because they have to put all of your vaccines back in. And about 2 weeks after the transplant, I'm back in there. By that point, I probably had that central line in for a month. And a nurse practitioner removed the central line, and she put it in a biohazard bag. And again, with the humor, she turned around, she said, "Would you like to take this home?" And I said, "That's not going to happen." But apparently some people asked to take them home. So the significance of the bell is when you're finished your active treatment and you know you're going to go on what we call a maintenance treatment. As you walk out of the hospital, you get to ring that bell a couple of times. It's a great feeling. I've done it obviously 3 times. So what do I do to keep active? Well, as I said earlier, I got involved with Multiple Myeloma Canada very early. I do a constant amount of volunteer work like this. I'm very active in the Toronto group. Again, we're a very large group. We're the oldest in Canada. In fact, we're older than Myeloma Canada.
You are.
And we have usually 40 people in our meetings. We do have Zoom calls as well for what we call shared care. But we're so close to Toronto, Sunnybrook, Princess Margaret, Toronto General, Hamilton, we get some excellent speakers. This coming Saturday, Dr. Roger Smith will be there to talk about kyphoplasty, so we do that. I'm also involved with a smaller group in York Region, and that works differently, and it seems to be working, as there's usually maybe 7 to 8 people, and they just want to talk. They want to talk about what's going on in their lives. is this happening to you? And that works for them. But we also go for walks. We go to Hyde Park, we go to Earl Bales Park. Before COVID, we were actually doing a lot more, and we're coming back into that because socializing is a big part of who you are when you have myeloma. The action days at Queen's Park. Advocacy is very important. When these drugs get approved by Health Canada, and they come, in my case, to Queen's Park, then you have to go there and say, we need some help. So when pomalidomide was approved by Health Canada, we went to Queen's Park and we said, you have to cover this. This is important. And Premier Kathleen Wynne was the premier then, and I had a one-on-one with her, and she was asking me, to her credit, she was asking me a lot of questions about myeloma, what it is and what we could do, and this and that, and I'm telling her why it's so important that we need this coverage. And I said, besides, the longer I live, the longer I vote. So that is very important, and 6 months later, pomalidomide was approved. Is that a coincidence?
No.
Okay. So a couple of years later, actually just after my third transplant, we had to go back to Queen's Park to get DARA approved. Same thing, we got to do this, please, it's very important. And 6 months later, it's covered. That's not a coincidence. So, advocacy really, really helps. Of course, the other thing you see is I attend the family physician forums with Bonnie, and Kevin was there. It's so important because the faster a family physician gets to his patient into an oncologist, and I should say some family physicians, they're in their mind that we're going to watch and see if the numbers go up. No disrespect to family physicians, they are a big part of our lives, but I'd rather an oncologist tell me whether he or she is happy with those numbers. So all that keeps me very, very busy. I think, some people, you should come into this world not necessarily to what you can do for yourself, but what you can do for others. And I find that volunteering is very, very rewarding, because I was a patient back then, and I remember my first trip to the doctor, and it was scary, really scary, because your life changes big time. I'm very encouraged now, because when I was first diagnosed, the treatment was pretty simple. You were either stem cell transplant eligible or you weren't. Thankfully I was. Velcade was just coming on. In fact, I was on thalidomide for a while, which was not a nice drug. So everybody keeps asking me, well, what is your mindset about how you deal with multiple myeloma? I don't let it take over my whole life. I still enjoy hockey. I can't jog, but I do exercise every day. I walk a lot because that's who I was before. So I'm not going to let myeloma do anything like that. And as I said, I'm so encouraged by the new treatments that are coming out. As Chantal said, we can't keep up with the scientific trials, and that's good, because any mechanic will tell you, the more you can never have enough tools in your toolbox. So where's my mindset? My favorite 2 songs of all time is Journey, Don't Stop Believing, and the Bee Gees, Staying Alive. And that's what I intend to do. And